Today is the day my relationship contract with Giselle expires. It's also the day I start anew. Sitting by the window at the cafe, I look at the impeccably made-up woman across from me, calculating when the $5 million in my account will be unfrozen. Giselle, a top actress in the entertainment industry with 30 million fans, is the sweet and charming national first love on screen. She picks up her coffee, her posture as elegant as if she were filming an ad. Calvin, the 3-year contract is over. You did well. The severance pay has been transferred to your account. The extra $500,000 is a bonus. Bonus. This is the first time I've heard of a breakup bonus. Over the past 3 years, my job has been simple, playing the role of her devoted boyfriend in public, acting as the reliable future son-in-law in front of her parents, and posing as that mysterious outsider lover, in the paparazzi's lenses. The price I paid was giving up the opportunity to study abroad, turning down an offer from a top architecture firm, and revolving my daily life around her schedule. I forced a smile. You're too kind. I'll take my leave then. See you around. I stood up, ready to make a cool exit. Wait. Giselle stopped me, pulled a document out of her Hermes bag, and slid it across the table. Sign this. I looked down. It was a non-disclosure agreement. Dense with clauses, but the gist was simple: if I ever breathed a word about the inside dealings of the past 3 years, I'd be paying until I was bankrupt. I laughed. Afraid I'll go blabbing? Don't worry, I know how to keep my mouth shut. Sign it before you leave. Her tone left no room for argument, her gaze carrying a hint of condescending scrutiny. I looked at the agreement, a mix of indescribable emotions welling up inside me. 3 years. I spent 3 years playing out a grand charade with her, and all I got in return was a confidentiality agreement. Fine. I picked up the pen and scribbled my name down in a few swift strokes. So, I lifted my head, intending to finish with one last polite remark. Before she could finish speaking, Giselle's face suddenly turned deathly pale. The coffee cup in her hand crashed to the floor with a sharp crack, scattering shards of porcelain and coffee everywhere. She clutched her stomach and slid off the chair entirely. Giselle. I froze. Everyone in the cafe turned their attention toward us. She curled up on the ground, her forehead drenched in cold sweat, her lips trembling, and her eyes fixed on me. Calvin, it hurts. Her voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz, nothing like the commanding presence of the superstar she usually was. My mind went blank. What new trick is this? To stop me from leaving, she puts on an act of sudden illness on the spot. Has she watched too many scripts? Call an ambulance. The shop assistant rushed over. Someone helped Giselle up, someone called the phone, someone handed water. And me, I just stood there like an idiot. A middle-aged woman rushed over and pointed at my nose, scolding, "Are you even a man? Your girlfriend is like this and you're just standing there." That's right. He looks decent enough, but his girlfriend is in so much pain and he doesn't even move. Jerk. Heartless bastard. Wave after wave of spit and insults came flying at me, and I felt like I was being publicly executed. Giselle was helped onto the nearby sofa, as fragile as a piece of paper that could be blown away by the wind at any moment. Her assistant Joey also arrived, looking anxious as he supported her. "Calvin, what's wrong with Giselle?" Joey asked me. I fucking wanted to know too. Just when I thought something was really wrong with her and was about to call an ambulance. Giselle slowly opened her eyes, her gaze passing over everyone and landing on me. She reached out a trembling hand and grabbed the hem of my shirt. Her lips parted and closed gently, her voice soft but every word crystal clear. "Don't go. The child can't grow up without a father." Boom, my mind exploded. The cafe exploded. Everyone exploded. A child? She's pregnant. Oh my God, this man is about to abandon his wife and child. Take a picture, take a picture. This is huge news. The phone flashes went off like crazy, and I felt like I was being nailed to a pillar of shame. I looked down at Giselle. There was an emotion in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Pain, vulnerability, but also a hint of cunning. Wait. Cunning. My mind raced. In the 3 years Giselle and I had been together, I had never even touched her, let alone held her hand more than a few times. Whenever her parents were around, we'd just link arms at most. A child? Did the air make her pregnant? Was this woman playing me? I lowered my voice and leaned closer to her. Giselle. What the hell are you doing? She didn't answer me. Instead, she rested her head on my shoulder and gave the surrounding crowd a weak but determined smile. Please don't blame my boyfriend. I'm just not in good health. He didn't even know I was pregnant. As soon as those words left her mouth, the anger of the onlookers skyrocketed. Your girlfriend is pregnant and you didn't know? Are you even human? Good looking, but black-hearted. Call the police. Let them arrest this scumbag. I felt like my ultimate public humiliation was being live-streamed across the internet. Meanwhile, Giselle, resting on my shoulder, whispered softly in a voice only I could hear, Calvin, come home with me. Otherwise, tomorrow's top trending topic will be, rising starlet abandoned by scumbag, faints on the street. Do you think you can get out of this? My whole body stiffened. Was this woman serious? In the end, I still went back to Giselle's apartment with her. Not because I was afraid of her, but because there were over 30 people holding up their phones gathered at the entrance of the cafe. If I dared to leave alone, I'd be trending on social media by tonight. I could already imagine the headline the gossip accounts would come up with, Giselle's mysterious boyfriend abandons wife and child. Once inside, Giselle immediately let go of my arm, as if she had become a different person. She slipped on her slippers, walked into the bedroom, changed into some loungewear, and came back out. The weak expression on her face was completely gone, and she even had the mood to pour herself a glass of warm water. Sit. She pointed at the sofa, sitting down first and crossing her legs. I stood still at the entrance, staring at her intently. Giselle, what exactly was that act you put on at the cafe just now supposed to mean? She took a sip of water and said, I wasn't acting. I really wasn't feeling well. I sneered, not feeling well. Then what did you mean by, a child can't grow up without a father? Since when is there a child between us? Giselle put down her water glass and looked up at me. Those eyes, always so tender and affectionate on screen, were now unusually calm. Calvin, do you really think the agreement I had you sign was just a confidentiality agreement? My heart skipped a beat. What was it then? She pulled another document out of her bag. A supplementary agreement. There's an additional clause in our relationship contract. If indivisible common interests arise during the contract period, the contract will automatically be extended for 1 year. Indivisible common interests. I frowned. Giselle nodded. Yes. For example, a child. I nearly jumped up. Are you crazy? We don't even have. She interrupted me, her eyes terrifyingly calm. Last month, on my birthday, you were drunk. Do you remember? I was stunned. Last month, on her birthday, she threw a small party at a private club. Her agent, assistant, and a few close friends from the industry were all there. I did drink quite a bit, because her gaze that day inexplicably unsettled me. As for what happened afterward, I blacked out. What do you mean? My voice tightened. I mean, Calvin, I'm pregnant. She stood up, walked over to me, and shoved the document into my hands. The child is yours. If you don't believe me, come with me for a prenatal checkup this weekend. The document in my hand felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. I opened it and saw it was a hospital examination report. Giselle, 26 years old, intrauterine early pregnancy, approximately 6 weeks. The date was 3 days ago. My mind completely shut down. I muttered to myself, impossible. I was dead drunk that night, how could this be? You were drunk, but I wasn't, Giselle said calmly. The implication of those words was overwhelming, and it took me several seconds to process. Are you saying, you made the first move? Giselle didn't answer. She turned around, walked back to the sofa, and sat down again. Calvin, you only have two choices now. She raised one finger. First, cooperate with me and renew the contract for another year. During this year, you'll continue to play the role of my boyfriend. Once the child is born, you can choose to leave, and I'll pay you double the breakup fee. She raised a second finger. Second, you walk out that door right now, and tomorrow I'll hold a press conference announcing that I've been abandoned by the father of my child. You know how many fans I have, do you think you can live a normal life? I looked at her face, that exquisite face, adored by countless people. This woman, for the past 3 years, had calculated every single step down to the last detail. When she came to me to sign the love contract, she made it very clear, she needed a clean boyfriend to deal with the media and her family, and I just happened to fit the bill. For 3 years, I did my duty, never asking too many questions, never overthinking. I thought that when the 3 years were up, I could take the money and go live my own life. But now I'm being told that not only do I have to keep playing the role of a tool, but I've also somehow become a father out of nowhere. Giselle. My voice was a little hoarse. Were you scheming against me from the very beginning? She looked up at me, a flicker of emotion passing through her eyes for a moment, but it quickly settled back into calmness. Calvin, I'm just making the choice that's best for me. You're doing the same. Staying won't put you at a disadvantage. I looked at her, feeling a tightness in my chest. This woman, always like this. Rational, composed, treating everything as a transaction. Including emotions. Including, the child. I'll think about it. I placed the documents on the coffee table and turned to walk toward the guest room. Calvin. Her voice came from behind me. I stopped in my tracks but didn't turn around. This weekend, come with me to the hospital. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. Those days, I was in a daze. I locked myself in the guest room, staring at the medical report over and over, replaying that night in my mind. But my memory was like a film reel with missing frames, impossible to piece together. I called my college friend Leo and vaguely explained the situation. Leo was silent on the other end for a long time before finally saying, Calvin, just accept it. Who is Giselle? She's a top actress right now, there's no reason for her to lie about something like this. If you really walk away, the internet will dig up your entire family history. I hung up the phone, lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Accept it? How? For the past 3 years, I had been nothing but a tool to her. Always available, always doing whatever she asked. In her world, I'm not even a supporting character, at best, a prop. But now this prop is about to become a father. The weekend arrived quickly. Giselle knocked on my door early. Let's go. She was wearing a loose hoodie today, no makeup, her hair casually tied back in a ponytail. She looked just like an ordinary college girl, nothing like the dazzling movie star on the red carpet. She didn't say a word during the ride, just leaned back in the car seat with her eyes closed. I drove, while Joey sat in the passenger seat, occasionally turning around to check on Giselle. Joey whispered to me, Calvin, Giselle has been having really bad reactions lately. She throws up everything she eats. She was still vomiting at around 3 in the morning last night. It breaks my heart to see her like this. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Giselle had her eyes closed, her lashes trembling slightly. I couldn't tell if she was asleep or just pretending. Private maternity hospital, VIP access. We were guided through the entire process, no waiting in line, no forms to fill out. Giselle went in for her checkup, while Joey and I waited outside. Calvin. Joey leaned in, hesitating as if he wanted to say something. What's wrong? Giselle, she's actually been through a lot. Joey had been with Giselle for 4 years, making him the closest person to her. Her parents were in a car accident 3 years ago and are still in a nursing home. She's been shouldering all the family expenses on her own, while also dealing with the pressure from the company. When you signed that contract, it was the toughest time for her. She needed someone to stabilize her public image, otherwise there would be issues with the investors. I fell silent. Giselle had never told me any of this. For 3 years, I thought she was just doing it for publicity, for attention. Turns out there was another reason behind it. Why didn't she tell me? Joey gave a bitter smile. You know Giselle, don't you? The thing she hates most is letting others see her vulnerability. She can cry her heart out in a scene, but in real life, she won't even let anyone see her tears. I turned to look at the door of the examination room, feeling as if something was stuck in my chest. Half an hour later, Giselle came out. Her face was even paler than when she arrived, and she walked slowly. In her hand, she held a small slip of paper with a black and white image on it. Here. She handed the slip to me, her tone as casual as if she were passing me a takeout menu. I took it and looked at the blurry image. A small, curled-up silhouette. Was this a baby? The fetal heartbeat is fine. Giselle walked past me, her voice very soft. The doctor said the development is normal. I clutched the ultrasound report, my knuckles turning white. Giselle. We need to talk. Back at the apartment, Giselle changed clothes and curled up on the sofa, holding a cup of warm milk. I sat down across from her and placed the ultrasound report in the middle of the coffee table. Giselle, tell me the truth. What truth? Did you keep me here for the child, or? I paused. Or for yourself? She looked down at the milk glass, saying nothing. The silence stretched on for so long that I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she finally spoke. Both. Her voice was soft, as if afraid to disturb something. A child needs a father. And in my current position, I need the image of a stable family. You are the most suitable candidate. The most suitable candidate. That phrase again. When she came to me 3 years ago, that was exactly what she said. Calvin, you're the most suitable person for this. No emotional entanglements, no trouble, just get paid and get the job done. I was short on money back then. My mom was in the hospital and needed a large sum for surgery. The price she offered was just enough. So we hit it off. 3 years later, she told me I was still the most suitable person. Is that all? I asked. She looked up at me. What else did you think there would be? I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, nothing came out. Yeah, what else could there be? We were a business relationship, from start to finish. I nodded. Fine. I'll stay. But I have conditions. Speak. First, when the child is born, I want to be involved in raising them. I'm not the kind of person who becomes a father and then runs away. Second, no matter what, after 1 year, I will regain my freedom. Unless the child needs it, I will not renew the contract. Third. I looked at her. Within this year, let's try to get along like a real family. I don't want the child to feel no warmth while still in the womb. Giselle looked at me, a flicker of emotion in her eyes that I couldn't read. Okay. She put down her milk glass and extended her hand. Deal. I looked at her hand, hesitated for a moment, and then took it. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. We held hands like that for a long time, neither of us letting go first. From that day on, subtle changes occurred in the life of Giselle and me. She no longer treated me like a tool at her beck and call. And I no longer saw her as a lofty employer. We began to get along like ordinary people. In the morning, she would knock on my door and ask, Calvin, what do you want for breakfast? I would leave notes on the fridge, prenatal checkup today, don't forget to bring your health insurance card. She would fall asleep on the sofa, and I would cover her with a blanket. She would vomit violently in the middle of the night, and I would hand her a glass of warm water, patting her back. Calvin. Who do you think the child should look like? Like me. I'm better looking. Where are you good looking? If it weren't for the contract, I wouldn't have come to you. Then why did you choose me back then? Because, you talk too little. That's it. That's it. Our conversations went from less than 10 sentences a day to half an hour over meals. Every time Joey came, she had a smile on her face. You two are more like a real couple than actual couples. Giselle rolled her eyes at her. What are you talking about? I smiled and didn't respond. But a voice inside me said, yes, more real than real. Too bad it's not real. One evening, Giselle answered a phone call, and her expression suddenly changed. After hanging up, she sat on the sofa, her fingers tightly gripping the phone. What's wrong? I asked. Her voice trembled slightly. It's my mom. The nursing home said her condition isn't good and asked me to come over. Then let's go. I'll drive you. You are willing to go with me? Why wouldn't I be? She looked at me, her eyes slightly red. Because, she might not recognize me. The doctor said her memory has regressed to 10 years ago. She thinks I'm still in college, that I haven't entered the entertainment industry yet, that. She didn't finish, her voice already choked. I walked over and patted her on the shoulder. Let's go. I'll go with you. The hospital room in the nursing home was very quiet. Giselle's mother leaned against the bed, her hair gray and her eyes unfocused. Seeing Giselle come in, she stared blankly for a long time. Are you Giselle's roommate? Giselle's eyes suddenly reddened. Mom, I'm Giselle. Her mother shook her head. Giselle? Giselle is still in school. She's studying acting, and she's going to be a big star someday. Giselle crouched by the bedside and held her mother's hand. Mom, I am Giselle. I became an actress. Look. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a still from her show to show her mother. Her mother stared at it for a long time, then suddenly smiled. She does look a lot like you. My daughter is that beautiful too. Who are you then? She turned to look at me. Giselle was taken aback for a moment, then said, Mom, he's my boyfriend, his name is Calvin. Boyfriend? Her mother looked me up and down. He's decent looking. What does he do for a living? Mom, he's an architectural designer. He's really talented. Architectural designer. I almost forgot, I used to study this. Giselle actually remembered. Her mother held my hand and rambled on for a long time. She said Giselle had been stubborn since she was a child, and when she said she wanted to be an actress, no one could talk her out of it. She said Giselle was very talented at acting, and her teachers all praised her. She said it wasn't easy for her to be on her own, and asked me to take good care of her. I nodded in agreement, my voice a little hoarse. Walking out of the nursing home, Giselle stood at the entrance and took a deep breath. Thank you, Calvin. What's there to thank? It's all. I almost said, part of the job, but the words caught in my throat. What part of the job? The contract didn't say anything about meeting the parents. Come on, let's go home, I said. The moment the words, go home, left my mouth, both of us froze for a second. On the way home, she leaned back in her seat and said softly, Calvin, you know, sometimes I can't tell the difference. Can't tell what? I can't tell whether you're the Calvin from the contract, or the real Calvin. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, and my heart skipped a beat. Is there a difference? Yes. She turned her head to look at me, the dazzling lights outside the car window reflecting on her face. Calvin in the contract only does what he should. The real Calvin does what he shouldn't. Like what? Like, just now, keeping me company. I didn't speak. She didn't speak either. The silence in the car suddenly felt different. It wasn't the awkward, distant silence of before. Instead, it was a kind of mutual understanding, a silence with warmth. I thought life would just go on like this. Plain, warm, until the year was up. But I forgot, Giselle is someone who lives in the spotlight. And I am the one standing in her shadow. That day, I was shopping at the supermarket when my phone suddenly wouldn't stop buzzing. Leo sent over a dozen messages in a row. Calvin, check the trending topics. I tapped to open it. Giselle's mysterious boyfriend's identity exposed. Giselle's boyfriend is a contract lover. Headlines like, "Giselle deceives fans," are increasingly sensational. The marketing account released a pile of evidence, a copy of my contract with Giselle from 3 years ago, my monthly bank statements showing payments, and even surveillance screenshots of us entering the same building from different entrances. The article reads like a detective novel, portraying me as the substitute boyfriend Giselle hired for $3 million. The comments section exploded. Giselle's persona has collapsed. And here I thought she was an innocent pure girl, turns out it was all a lie. Who's that guy? Acting for money? Both of them are disgusting. Unfollowing. I stood in front of the supermarket shelf, my mind buzzing. Copies of the contract. Bank statements. Only Giselle, her lawyer, and I had those. How could they have leaked? I abandoned my shopping cart and drove straight to Giselle's apartment. Joey was pacing anxiously at the door. "Calvin, you're finally back." Giselle was called to the company by her agent, said there's a meeting. What kind of meeting? Just, to deal with this. Joey's eyes were red with worry. The company is furious. They said they're going to sue whoever leaked the contract and that Giselle will have to bear the consequences herself. Who leaked it? I don't know. The lawyer is looking into it. I was about to leave when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Calvin, hello." The voice was low, with a hint of mockery. "Who are you?" "You don't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that I was the one who leaked that contract." I clenched my phone tightly. "What do you want?" The other person laughed. "What do I want? I want Giselle to be ruined. Back then, she stole my role and climbed to the top by stepping on me. Now, I'm going to make her pay back double. Calvin, I suggest you stay away from her. Otherwise, your background will be completely exposed. A loser who didn't even graduate from college and was rejected by every agency, what do you think the netizens will think of you?" The call ended. My hands were trembling. Not out of fear, but out of anger. I checked the number, it was a virtual number, untraceable. I called Giselle, but no one answered. I called her agent, but the phone was off. Sitting in the car, I felt like half the sky had fallen. At 2 a.m, Giselle came back. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen, clearly, she had been crying. She saw me sitting in the living room and paused for a moment. "You're still awake. Waiting for you." She changed her shoes, walked over to the sofa, and sat down, hugging a cushion and curling herself into a ball. "What did the company say?" "Let me stay indoors for now, until the heat blows over." "That person who called, do you know them?" Giselle looked up. "Someone called you?" I repeated the content of that call. After she heard it, her expression changed. "It's him." "Who?" "Hugo. Hugo. I've heard that name. He was the actor who competed with Giselle for a movie's lead female role 3 years ago. Don't ask me why a male actor would compete with a female actress for a role, that part was a cross-dressing role, and in the end, Giselle won. It's said that because of this, Hugo's career took a nosedive. He later faded out of the entertainment industry. He threatened me before. Giselle bit her lip. Said he'd make me regret it. How could he get the contract? On the legal side, there's one of his people. Giselle closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Calvin, I'm sorry. I dragged you into this. I looked at her weary face, and something in my heart clenched tightly. Don't say that. But. I interrupted her. Giselle. Let me ask you a question. Go ahead. Do you regret it? Regret signing that contract? Regret, coming to me? She opened her eyes and looked at me. For a long, long time. No regrets. The voice was soft, but firm. I smiled. Then it's not a burden. We're in the same boat. If we sink together. If we turn things around, we do it together. Giselle looked at me, her eyes reddening again. Calvin, why am I good to you? I finished her sentence. Because you're the mother of my child. That's it? Yes, that's right. She shot me a glare, but the corners of her mouth lifted slightly. It was the first time today that she had smiled. The next day, Giselle posted a message. It wasn't written by the PR team, she wrote it herself. 3 years ago, I did sign a contract. I needed someone I could trust to get me through the toughest days. Calvin is not my contract lover, he is my friend, and he is the person I love. There is a contract between us, but beyond that contract, there is something far more important. The baby is due in September, and we will welcome him together. I won't respond to any doubts. I won't accept any slander. I take responsibility for my own life. After the message was sent, the buzz exploded. The comments were polarized. Some people cursed her, calling her shameless for deceiving her fans for 3 years. Others supported her, saying that artists are also human and have the right to protect their privacy. I sat on the sofa, looking at her profile. You said, there are things more important than the contract beyond the contract itself. What are they? She turned her head to look at me. Guess. I can't guess. Then keep guessing. She stood up and walked toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she turned back to look at me. Calvin. You have that thing too. The door closed. I sat on the sofa, feeling my heart beating too fast. I have it too. What does that mean? The storm lasted about a week. Giselle didn't show up, nor did she issue any further statements. Neither did I. Leo, on the other hand, called me over a dozen times, asking what was really going on. I said, the situation is, I'm going to be a dad. Leo was silent for 3 seconds, then said, Calvin, damn. Just 1 word. 2 words, truly impressive. I hung up the phone with a smile. The turning point came suddenly. Hugo, the one who had called to threaten me, was taken away by the police for investigation on suspicion of infringing on trade secrets. It was said that his computer contained dozens of confidential contracts of artists, involving 7 or 8 popular celebrities. As soon as this came to light, all the blame shifted to Hugo. So he's a repeat offender. People like him should rot in jail. Giselle is also a victim, I feel for her. The tide turned overnight. Giselle's company seized the opportunity to release a statement, saying they would pursue legal action against Hugo. They also specifically emphasized, the relationship between Giselle and Calvin is genuine and valid, the contract is merely a supplementary image management agreement. The feelings between the two are not bound by any contract. I read the statement 3 times. Not bound by the contract. Then what is it bound by? I wanted to ask her, but I didn't get the chance. Because from that day on, Giselle's schedule suddenly became extremely packed. Reshooting commercials, attending variety shows, recording new songs. Leaving early and coming back late every day, sometimes not even showing up for days. Joey said she was racing against time, because her belly was growing bigger day by day, and soon she wouldn't be able to work anymore. I could understand, but I still felt an emptiness inside. I had gotten used to having someone to eat with, watch TV with, and discuss baby names with every day. Suddenly being alone again, I found it surprisingly hard to adjust. One evening, I received a phone call. Calvin, it's Giselle. Yeah, what's up? Can you come to the hospital? What's wrong with you? I stood up abruptly. It's not me, it's Hugo. Hugo? What does he have to do with me? He said he wants to see you. See me? He said, he has something to tell you, about 3 years ago. My heart skipped a beat. Hugo was detained in the detention center, having lost a lot of weight, nothing like the arrogant voice I'd heard on the phone before. He looked at me through the glass and grinned. Calvin, you still don't know, do you? Know what? Why do you think Giselle came to you to sign the contract? Because I'm suitable, I said. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Suitable? She came to you because she already knew you. In her sophomore year, she went to your school to see a graduation design exhibition. She took one look at your work and was drawn to it. Later, she sent 3 different groups to investigate your background. She found out that you gave up studying abroad because of your mother's illness, and that signing the contract would get you the money for the surgery. The price she offered was exactly the amount needed for the operation, not a penny more, not a penny less. My brain felt like it had been struck by lightning. What do you mean? I mean, she's been protecting you for the past 3 years. She kept you by her side with a contract, not because she needed some tool, but because she knew what you were missing, what you needed. She knew that if she didn't, you'd shoulder everything alone and burn yourself out. She let you live in her home, made sure you ate well and slept well, so you wouldn't have to worry about money. She gave you 3 years to recover, to get back on your feet. Your study abroad opportunity, she helped you apply for a deferral with the school. You were rejected by every firm because she was afraid you'd get bullied in the workplace and wanted you to grow stronger first. She arranged everything for you, only. Hugo looked at me, a strange expression in his eyes. It's just that she won't say it. She's been like that since she was a child, she never speaks up. I stood by the glass window, trembling all over. Why are you telling me this? Hugo lowered his head. Because I owe her. That role 3 years ago, she didn't take it from me. I just didn't act well enough, and the director didn't want me. But I blamed everything on her. I've done a lot of wrong things. I wanted to destroy her, because I couldn't destroy myself. But now, I don't want to take these secrets into prison. Calvin, Giselle is someone with a tough exterior but a soft heart. Everything she's done for you, she's shown through actions, never said a word. Don't let her carry it all alone for a lifetime. When I walked out of the detention center, it was already dark. Leaning against the car, I looked up at the star-filled sky. 3 years. Over 1,000 days and nights. I thought we were putting on a play. I thought she was just buying my time with money. I thought to her, I was nothing more than the most suitable candidate. But it turns out, from the very beginning, she was protecting me. She treated my struggles as her own. She carefully tucked away my dreams, waiting to return them to me when I was ready. She bore everything alone, yet never let me know. My eyes grew wet. I dialed Giselle's number. Hello. Her voice sounded a bit weary. Did you meet him? What did he say? Giselle. Where are you? At home. I just got back from recording a show and am about to go to sleep. Wait for me. What am I waiting for you for? It's the middle of the night. The call had already ended. I drove, speeding all the way. When I reached the apartment entrance, I punched in the code for the lock and pushed the door open. The living room light was still on. Giselle was wearing a loose pair of pajamas, curled up on the sofa, holding a book in her hand. When she saw me come in, she frowned. What's gotten into you? It's so late. I didn't say a word. I walked over, crouched down, and looked at her. She felt a bit uneasy under my gaze. What are you doing? Is there something on my face? Giselle. What exactly are you trying to say? Have you ever been to the graduation design exhibition at a university before? Her body stiffened slightly. No. Did you go when you were a sophomore? I said no. Then how do you know I studied architectural design? She opened her mouth but said nothing. Giselle. I held her hand, and it was trembling. When did you start liking me? The air fell silent. So silent that the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Giselle lowered her head, her long lashes shielding her eyes. For a long, long time. In college. My roommate was your high school classmate, and she showed me your graduation project. At that time, I hadn't debuted yet and didn't have much money. I kept thinking, when I have money someday, I must find you and have you design a house for me. It doesn't have to be big, but it must have a garden. And also a sunroom, so I can bask in the sun during winter. Her voice grew softer and softer, until I could barely hear it. Later, I debuted, made money, and went to find you. But you weren't doing well. Your mother was sick, you had to drop out of school, you had to give up everything. I didn't know how to help you. If I had just given you money directly, you definitely wouldn't have accepted it. So you came up with the idea of signing a contract. She nodded. Giselle. Are you stupid? She looked up and glared at me. You're the one who's stupid. Before I could finish, I held her. Gently, carefully, avoiding her belly. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was afraid that if you knew, you'd think I was patronizing you. You hate being patronized more than anything, don't you? I smiled, but my eyes were warm. I let go of her and looked seriously into her eyes. Giselle, listen to me. These past 3 years, I thought I was just your tool. I thought you paid me, I did the work, and we were even. But the study abroad deferment you secretly applied for on my behalf, the cases you turned away from me, and all those things you never said. I know them all now. Giselle's eyes flickered, and her voice was muffled. Did Hugo tell you? I interrupted her. Never mind who said it. I only have one question for you now. Go ahead. How long were you planning to keep it from me? She bit her lip and said nothing. Fine, if you won't say it, then I will. Giselle, the thing I hate most in this life is people pitying me. But if it's you, I'm willing. Not because of the child. Because of you. I looked into her eyes and said word by word. The contract is void. From today on, it's not because you're the mother of my child that I'm staying by your side. It's because I want to stay by your side. Giselle, I like you. It didn't start today. Maybe, it started a long time ago. I just didn't realize it myself. Giselle stared at me blankly, her eyes gradually turning red. You're lying. Her voice trembled slightly. You said before that you wanted to leave. That was before. And now? Now I don't want to leave. Why? Because. I realized I can't seem to imagine a future without you. She let out a snort of laughter, tears streaming down her face. Calvin, that was so cheesy. Cheesy or not, as long as you get the point. I reached out and wiped the tears from her face. So, what's your answer? Giselle sniffled, burying her face in my chest. Her voice was muffled, but every word was crystal clear. My answer, hasn't it always been obvious? It's been written in the contract you signed 3 years ago. Which clause? Article 3, Section 7. I froze. I had signed that contract 3 years ago, but I had never actually read it carefully. What does that one say? She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears, yet a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Party A promises to provide Party B with necessary living support, career assistance, and... She paused. And emotional care. I laughed. Emotional care. Have you ever cared for me? The words you've spoken to me in 3 years don't add up to what you've said this week. Because. I don't know how. Don't know how to do what? Don't know how to talk to someone I like. I was stunned. Giselle, who always held herself high and spoke so eloquently, actually said she doesn't know how to talk to someone she likes. She turned her face away, the tips of her ears turning red. What are you laughing at? I'm not laughing. The corners of your mouth are practically reaching your ears. That's happiness. I pulled her back into my arms. Giselle, from now on, no more contracts. If there's something you want to say, just tell me directly. If you don't know how to say it, learn slowly. I'll teach you. She didn't say a word, but the hand resting on my waist tightened even more. The city outside the window was brightly lit, and in the distance, someone was setting off fireworks. The apartment was very quiet, with only the two of us. No, it was 3. I looked down at her slightly swollen belly. Baby, your mom is an idiot. You're the idiot. The person in my arms muttered back in a muffled voice. I laughed. This time, it was a genuine laugh. 3 months later, I received the acceptance letter for my first independent design project. It wasn't any landmark building, just a community library with a modest budget. But the client said something I'll remember for a long time: your design has the breath of life. That day, I came home to find Giselle doing prenatal yoga in the living room, 7 months pregnant. Catching sight of the document in my hand, she raised an eyebrow. "You got it?" "Yes," I said. "How much?" "Not much. But it's a new beginning for me." She glanced at me, said nothing, but the corners of her mouth lifted. Another 2 months passed. On September 17th, at 3 in the morning, Giselle shook me awake, her voice trembling slightly. "Calvin. I think it's time." I sprang up from the bed, 10 times more nervous than she was. By the time we got to the hospital, she was surprisingly calm, signing a stack of surgery forms and even taking a moment to text her agent. I paced back and forth in the hallway hundreds of times, my palms drenched in sweat. At 5:43 in the morning, a loud cry rang out from the delivery room. A nurse came out holding a tiny bundle, smiling as she said, "It's a girl, and she's very healthy." Looking at her wrinkled little face, I burst into tears. When Giselle was brought out, her face was very pale. Seeing me crying so hard, she smiled weakly. I held her hand, my voice hoarse. "Giselle, thank you." "For what?" "Thank you, for letting me know what a home is." She didn't say anything more, but her fingers gently squeezed mine back. She looked at the baby in the small crib beside her, waving tiny fists, her eyes full of light. The hallway lights were warm. The little one in the stroller had her eyes closed, sleeping peacefully and quietly. I looked at them and, for the first time, felt that the best thing I've ever done in my life wasn't winning some design award, but signing that contract 3 years ago.